started. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's see here if we can get this going. Yes, hi. I'm a real person, not just a voice behind the stream. Welcome to today's live stream. My name is Keisha Rose. I'm a developer advocate here at Tableau. I'm joined by my fellow advocates here in the chat as well. So as we go through today's live stream, if you have any questions, comments, feedback in general, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll take a look at them, and so will my fellow advocates, Tucker and Gigi, who are here as well. But today, we're going to go through and build a web data connector from scratch. I want to show you guys it's pretty easy to do once you know the basic steps, and hopefully, once you're done, you'll be able to make your own web data connectors. Today, I'll show you how to set up your web data connector to connect to data. We're going to use a couple different APIs, and we're also going to build multiple tables. Now, if you want to follow along, maybe wait till the recording. Yes, this is going to be recorded and posted on YouTube. So if you want to follow along, maybe wait for the YouTube recording so you can pause and write as you go. But once you do try it out for yourself, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need Tableau Desktop. So that's what you're going to need to connect to web data connectors in general. Then you're going to need a place to host your web data connector. So some type of web server, it could be internal, external, locally hosted just to test it out. Anything that works fine. And you also are going to need a code editor or some type of IDE. You're also going to need Chrome 79. Now, why would you need a very specific version of Chrome? That's because as of Chrome 80, they changed a couple different things. So if you want to help yourself and debug and troubleshoot your web data connector, you're going to need to download Chrome 79. And we have that available in the documentation, so you can grab your copy there. Now you're also going to need some JavaScript skills just in general. I'm not going to be teaching you JavaScript today. I'll show you a couple things and I'll mention where you can find some more information, but we're going to focus on just the web data connector. And of course, you're going to need a cool data source to connect to, some type of web-based data with an API that you can pull in to your web data connector. Now, we've done a stream before, but we also have another stream coming up in the future. Next up, we've got Tucker, who I mentioned is my fellow developer advocate. He'll be doing a Hyper API stream coming up maybe next month or so. If you wanted to do it faster, just chat him in the chat. Say, Tucker, we need that stream now. Send it to the chat right now. If you have questions, again, throw them in the chat. I'll be looking at the chat as well, and my team will help you along the way answer any questions. Now, if you have a request, if you want to see a particular web data connector, if you want to try out a different API, last time we did extensions. If you wanted to see maybe some cool new things, if you want to do a little bit more in-depth on any of those topics, send us a request. Develop a program at tableau.com. Shoot us an email, let us know what you want to see, and we can make it happen. All right, so just because I just started the stream, I'm going to take a look at the chat and just make sure nothing is, going wrong, nothing's on fire. Seeing some awesome emojis. Fantastic. Cool. All right. Let's go. So today, the data source that we're going to connect to is all about weather data. So we're going to be looking at some temperatures, and we're going to look at it at a 7-day forecast. Now, the API I'm using today is provided by here.com, and I'll show you more about that in a second. And they provide both daily and hourly weather data. So let's see what this looks like, the final product. I'm going to go ahead and connect to our web data connector. I already have it here in my history. If you want to try it out yourself, feel free. I'll put the link here in the chat if you guys want to see the final product. There we go, if you want to check it out yourselves. But what we have here is a connector that allows you to select a city, and for that city, you get the 7-day forecast. Now, what's going on here? So the first thing I did, I wanted to say, put in a city, right? So let's say we talk about my hometown. I'm from Rochester, New York. So if I go ahead and put in Rochester, you'll see smack dab, there's my home city, Rochester, New York. But I was worried that if I only showed just the name, or it didn't show any feedback about the city you entered, maybe you would get the wrong data. Perhaps you were looking for Rochester, Minnesota. And if I put in just Rochester, you might not realize you're getting the wrong city. So I had this nice little map preview. So I change up my search here. You'll see I'm now getting Rochester, Minnesota, and then the forecast will be accurate for the right city. Finally, the thing to note here, for the 3 countries out there, including the United States, I think it's Myanmar and Liberia, that are still using imperial units, I do have a little checkbox for us down there for those of us who can't understand Celsius. So clicking on that and hitting Get Forecast, it's going to pull in that data using that Here API, which does geocoding and weather, super convenient. And I have set up to pull in specifically the daily and hourly data. So let's see if we're going to get some information here. And it is live, so of course, if it fails, you'll know it's a live demo. It's really happening. Also, if you guys are all using it, that might affect it too. There we go. So I'm now getting our daily forecast. Got some cool things to look at here, like temperature, rainfall, wind direction for the days. And then if I want to look at it at the hourly level, I have those similar types of things, but now I'm looking at it by the hour. All right, so that's what we're going to be building today. So let's go ahead and get started without any further ado. I mentioned you're going to need a web server to host on and a code editor. I'm using Glitch. I've used it before. It's one of my favorite tools to use. You can code collaboratively, and as you code, your app gets run. So it's very nice and easy to use. Today, I'm going to be using the DataDev Live page. Last time, I tried to let you guys hop on the same page at the same time. I'm going to ask you to refrain, because when so many people hop on the same glitch page, it tends to slow down, and that's going to slow down the stream. But you can take a look at the final code after the stream. I'll leave it there as well if you want to dive in for yourself. Now, like I said, I'm not going to talk about how to use HTML or CSS or JavaScript, so I have a couple things in here to get us started. I have the overall outline for the page I want. I've got my CSS already styled in here, but I have no JavaScript, so that will be fully coded live on the stream today as we go through. Now, the nice thing about Glitch, as I mentioned, is as you make changes, it updates automatically. So let's go ahead and just recreate the structure we have here, starting with the header at the top. Just going to uncomment these, and you'll see as I do that, on the right-hand side, there we go, it gets updated. Cool, so let's see what we need here. And also just glance at the chat. Yeah, I'm from Rochester. Shout out to Rochester, hey-o. Very few of us out here on the West Coast, but we exist. Nice to see ya. Let's see, what's next? We need to get the input. So again, I want to search for a particular city. So I have here my label for the input. And the most important thing to notice here is that my input has an ID of query. So all of these different inputs and objects have different IDs, so that later on, when I'm changing my code, I'm able to identify what I want to change. So later on, I can pull the city name from this input based on the ID. And I have a little placeholder from Seattle, which is where I'm at right now. Got to write both cities. And for right now, I've got my autocomplete on off just for today's demo because it was kind of pulling up a bunch of random stuff. So that looks good. Now, the next piece of this was the map preview. Now, I have a simple little map image that I just created for the default. And then we also have as a placeholder here where the city in full will show up later. So I'm going to show my map image. And I have a graphic that I can use. Let's grab it. Here's my little map placeholder. Just going to bring this into Glitch. There we go. And I can grab this URL and slap that in to my image source. There we go. Cool. Next up, let's add a little spacing there. Next up, I want to put in the name of the city. For right now, I'll just leave this as dash, dash, dash as a placeholder. And then finally, we want to make sure we get in our submit button. So notice again, I have an ID for the button. I have an ID for the place where I want to update the city. and same thing for the map image. All that's important later on, so I can pull that information. Oh, and I almost forgot, for again, those 3 countries who just can't understand Celsius, the option to bring your data in as imperial units. Cool. So again, this is just plain scaffolding. Nothing is plugged in yet. So we're going to get started on the front end of this web data connector, figuring out pulling in the data, geocoding the cities, getting the map image, and then we'll swap into getting that data into the web data connector. Take a quick pause. We'll look at the questions here. Yeah, Bill's from the 716, much love for the 585. I know, I remember when they changed that area code way back in the day. Goodness. Let's see, all right. Looking good. All right, cool. Again, you got a question, comment, shout out, put it in the chat. Looks like you're good. I'll keep going. So I'm going to be using today Jquery, very popular library that just makes it a little easier to get things done in JavaScript. If you want to learn about it, do a quick Google search. Jquery is super useful if you haven't used it before. So I'm going to pull in that library here, and I can start getting going on my scripting here. So the first thing I want to do is actually pull in the name of the city that the person is searching for. And you'll notice that I didn't add any button to hit search or anything like that. I have it right now set up to do the search when I push enter. So I want to start off by adding an event listener that just says whenever someone pushes enter, run the search on the city they have entered here. All right, and I'm going to use Jquery again because, like I said, makes it super easy to do stuff like this very quickly. So let's go ahead and add a event listener to the document, so the whole page, if anyone presses enter at any time, right, so on key press. Now you can't say on enter button, right? You have to say on key press, and then you can specify which key you're looking for. So in my function here, I'm going to get an event, if I can spell function correctly. That is always the bane of my live streams or any webinar I'm doing, is making sure not to typo. If you guys see a typo, let me know in the chat. But on key press here, we're going to get an event. And that event is going to tell us which key was actually pressed. So I can say, well, if the specific key we want, and that I can find with the event.which, if that equals 13, and 13 is a code for the enter button. If you're looking for a specific letter, you would use a different code. If that equals 13, then we're going to go ahead and run our search function, which I haven't built yet, but I'll just put it in here as a placeholder. So whenever anyone presses enter, we're going to check, well, anytime any button gets pressed at all, we're going to check, was it the enter button? If it was, go ahead and search for the city that was entered. Cool. Now let's go ahead and actually build out our search city function. Oh my goodness, typoing is going to be a problem. We'll see. I'll have to make sure I look and go slow as I'm typing here. All right, so our search city function needs to take the city from the input field that we've got typed here, and then it's going to use the here API to geocode that city for us. So when I say I'm using the here API, I mean here.com. So you can take a look at their tools over here. Very awesome service. They have a great free tier if you're just trying it out for yourself. I think it's like 100,000 requests for the month. Fantastic if you want to get your hands dirty with some geocoding or even weather data. Very, very useful. They've got a bunch of really cool APIs. And this is just the REST APIs. They also have some map tiling APIs as well. So I'm going to be using the geocoding and search API, which I've got open right here. And it's pretty straightforward. You can basically look at the endpoint, you pass in the query or the city that we're searching for, and you're going to pass in the API key. All right, so keep that in mind. That's what we're going to be using today. So let's start off by grabbing the value that the user has entered. I'll use Jquery here again. And grabbing the value based off of the ID here, query. And we're going to just say, let's set this up as a variable. So let's say our query equals whatever this value is. Okay? So if I console log this out, let's take a look at the console here. If I type in Seattle and maybe hit enter, oh, good, gotta refresh. There we go. I hit enter, the key press function gets triggered, it runs the search city function for me, it pulls in the data that I've typed in, and I'm good to go. Cool. So let's keep moving. Now that I have the query, I can use the API to geocode that to a lat and long. So I'm going to just copy this code here from the reference, and I'll say this is our URL that we're going to query. And we'll need a few pieces here. So I'm going to be using this little JavaScript template string. And let's take a look at this. So we start off with the endpoint to geocode, and then it's going to ask for two parameters. First is the query. What are you actually searching for? So here I want to pass in that query value. So I'm going to use a little JavaScript template, which is the $sign and those curly brackets, and I can pass in my query variable. Next, it's going to ask for my API key. So in this case, I have an API key from here that I've already set up beforehand. It's very simple. You can sign up and you get a key practically instantly. Now, the awesome thing about this, you might have noticed that I'm using fully client-side script here. I'm not using any like a Node.js server or anything like that. That's because here has a nice function that allows you to specify which domains your API key can be used from. So I can actually just type in my API key here. Let's put that in a variable. And it's perfectly fine to do because it will only work from the domains that I have specified. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my API key. All right, so when this URL gets formatted, it'll bring in the query into the queue parameter and my key into the API key parameter. Now let's go ahead and actually fetch the data from this endpoint. So I'm going to use fetch API. I already have my URL, that's great. When you use the fetch API, the first thing it will respond to you is an HTML response. So what we're going to want to do is extract the JSON from that response. So we take a look at the reference here again. You'll see we're going to get a series of items, right? This is a one city that was searched for based on the query. So we're looking to pull this information for whatever I've searched for in the Web Data Connector. So first thing I need to do is pull out that JSON. And once I've done that, I can do whatever I want with it. For now, let's go ahead and just console log this data so you guys can see what it looks like. All right, let's give that a refresh just to make sure we're good. So again, I'll put in Seattle, and you'll see we get the data with the items, right? So here we're gonna get just one city. Sometimes you will get multiple cities, so you'll see later on, once I start to parse out the city, I'm just going to grab the first one. It's usually the correct one, but just so you know, you are getting an array of items, an array of cities. But here we can get the actual full title of the city. So it includes the city, the state, or province, or country. All that information will be pulled into this title here. And I also have the position for the latitude and the longitude. So I can pull out these pieces to use as I go forward with my Web Data Connector. All right, quick check on the chat. Let's see here. Yeah, oh yeah. So someone asked, is it possible to use something like React or Vue to generate your Web Data Connector page? Absolutely, yes. You can use whatever flavor of JavaScript you want. I'm just using plain old vanilla today because it's the easiest for demos and for people to start with. But if you want to use React or whatever you like, yeah, feel free. Absolutely. Is this going to be on YouTube later? Yes, it is. Can you make the font bigger? I absolutely can. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit better. There we go. Hopefully that's a little bit better for you guys. And it looks like Gigi's already on those questions too. She's a beast. Awesome. All right. Let's keep going. So now that we get that data, right? So we know we have this nice object and it has items, and within those items we have each city, which is the title, then the position, and then the latitude and longitude. So keeping that in mind, I can start to build out and take out the pieces that I need for my search city function. So first up, let's go ahead and create a little function here. Okay. Give it some space. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just grab the very first object within the items object here. So I'm going to say let city equal the data we just pulled in, which is the entire object. Then we're going to look for items, and we're going to bring in the first or the 0th item. So this will represent this 0th object here. Now, I want to use this information not just for the view, the map, and the name. I also want to pass it on to the data connector later. So I'm actually going to create a couple global variables here for the title, which is that full city name, the latitude, and the longitude. And then I can update those global variables once I've pulled in the information. So I'll say title is now equal to city.title. And again, we're getting that from this object here, right? The latitude is going to equal city.position. What is it? Lat? Yeah, lat. And again, I'm just looking at the object here to find that information. Same thing with the longitude. City, position, LNG for longitude. So now that I have each of those pieces, I can do a couple things. First, we want to update the text, right? We also then want to update the map image. Finally, now that we have gotten the data, I want to enable this Get Forecast button. I forgot to mention it earlier, but this Get Forecast button I have currently disabled so that you can't accidentally start the web data connector before you have a city selected. So I also want to enable the button. Cool. So updating the text is pretty simple. I've got the ID as city here, so I can just use that to update. Again, using that Jquery to grab the city object, and then I'll just say, bring in that title. So we got the text, nice. I'm going to come back to the update map, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the enable button. And again, I can just grab the submit button, which I have the ID for back here. And I can just update the property for disabled from true to false. So I'll say prop disabled false. Cool. Let's just stop there and test real quick. The map won't change, but we should see the full city show up and the button being enabled. Let's see. There we go. So now we're getting the full title, including the city, the state, the country, whatever province, whatever. It's international, so anywhere you want to throw in here. If I want to put in, let's say, Mauritius for Gigi, we're going to get Mauritius. Gigi, give me a city in Mauritius. I don't know any of the cities, but we're looking good. We've got our things set up, the button is enabled, and we're pulling in the full title there. Now, let's go ahead and work on update map. So, oh, Port Louis, okay. Port Louis, let's see. There we go, it found it, nice. Shout out to all the merchants out there. We've got our developer advocate, Gigi. Cool, all right. So now we need to update update the map. Now we've got an awesome map image API provided by here as well, and it's very straightforward. All you need to do, pass in your API key, pass in the latitude and longitude you want to use, and then we've got these two last parameters. VT is the type of map image you want to use. I'm going to be using 0, that's just the default map. And then Z is the zoom level. So how far do you want that map tile to be zoomed in? All right, so I'm going to copy this for our request over here. And I'm going to have this update map function take the latitude and the longitude. It's not going to be created yet. I'm just going to put that there as a placeholder. But our update map function will take whatever latitude and longitude we've passed, and we can use that to grab the image. So let's go ahead and make that function. Update map. It gets latitude and longitude. All right, so the first thing we need to do is again set up the URL. All right, taking that from the reference there. Let's just clean this up a little bit. And again, we're gonna template in all these pieces. So first up, we've got the API key. Again, gonna make sure I throw in my actual API key. The latitude here, we want to pull in the actual latitude for the city we've searched for. Here again, we'll bring in that longitude. Now, again, I said for the map type, keeping it at 0, that's just the default. I think that's fine. And I found that so far a zoom of 12 is pretty nice. All right, so we've got our URL. You know what's next. We got to fetch the data. In this case, it's not going to be JSON though, it's going to be an image. But we can still use the fetch API. So we're going to fetch this URL we have crafted. And again, we need to take the response and extract what we need from it. So from the response, we're going to grab a blob. That's the data type for the image we're getting back. Then, once we have that information, we can actually do something with it. In this case, we're going to use it as the source for our image. All right, so the way we do this is by using the file reader API. So I'm going to create a new reader. And again, not going to go through all the specifics, sorry, but hopefully you can take a quick Google search on how to use the file reader API. But for in this case, it's pretty straightforward and simple. We're just going to create a new reader. So I'll call this reader equals new file reader. Okay. And what we can do from there is add a couple different functions to it and tell it to read the data. So I'll say reader, read as data URL. So it's going to read the data we got back from the here map image API into the file reader. I'm going to use blob here. Let's call this blob just so we can keep everything straight. So we're reading in that blob into the file reader. Then once we've loaded that image, I want to take the results of the reader and slap it into the image source. So we're going to say reader, when you load it, or on load end, I'm going to pass it this function. Yeah, that'll work. We're going to take the reader result and update the image source. So remember, I had an ID on my image, it's map, so I can use that ID here as well. So I can say map. We're going to change the attribute for the source. Remember when I added the image, I slapped in the URL for that uploaded image. Well, we're just changing this image to the source here. So we're going to change the attribute, source, and it's going to be the reader result. So the result of that image file being read using the file reader API, I can then use as the source for the image. And it's actually just going to be like a base 64 coded text that will be used as a source if you're curious. But let's test it out, make sure it's working. All right. Seattle. Cross my fingers. Oh no, it's not working. Oh, I have something somewhere that I've messed up. Let's see. It's telling me, thank goodness for the console log, right? What did I miss here? We've got the file reader. La la la. Maybe it needs this. Do. Oh. Everything looks fine. Let's clear this out. See if we're still getting that error. Well, like I said, guys, it is live, so we're doing live debugging. First thing I want to check is, let's make sure that the URL is being crafted properly. So let's log out the URL. I'm also going to log out the data here as well, which is going to be weird, but we'll see. Oh my gosh, I forgot to uncomment. Duh! I'm sure some of you are yelling at me like, Keisha, go back and uncomment. Yep, there we go. Fabiano, thank you very much. Oh, goodness gracious. Just in case you weren't sure if it's live, it is. There we go. Phew! I thought I typoed somewhere. There we go. We've got the map image. Yes, probably shouldn't forget to uncomment my functions. Thank you very much, guys. And we're looking very good. We get Seattle, we get downtown. This is perfect. We're getting the name showing up and the button is enabled. Our search city function is all set to go. Cool. All right, let me take a quick pause, see if there are any outstanding questions. Although Gigi and Tucker are on it, so probably not. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, like I said, you guys are on it. But just in case for the folks who are watching the recording, I will repeat some of the good questions in here. So someone asked about the API limit. So for here, I believe it's 100,000 requests for the month, which is pretty darn good for a free tier. And then of course you can pay more for the production or higher level tiers as well. I think somebody asked again about resources. Oh yeah, absolutely, definitely recommend Free Code Camp. Love that. Udemy is awesome. Also Code Academy is good too. Bunch of great resources out there to learn about JavaScript and HTML, all the fun stuff. Somebody asked about refreshing. Yes, so once you get this web data connector set up, you are able to hit refresh manually at any time, but then you can also set up a refresh schedule to refresh the data connector for you if you're using Tableau server, for instance. And that could be as frequent as every 15 minutes if you wanted to. Cool. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so where have we gotten so far? We've gotten our search city function all set up. We've gotten the map to show up so people know that they're pulling in the right city, Rochester, Minnesota versus Rochester, New York. And I think we are good to go to actually move into the next phase. So if you take a look at our getting started information here, or the documentation for web data connectors, you'll know that there are multiple phases that a web data connector goes through. There's two main ones though. The first is the interactive phase. So this is what we're seeing here, the place where you type in your information, maybe you set some configuration settings, you throw in your API key, whatever it is that you need to do as the end user to set up the configuration for the web data connector. Maybe you need to log in with OAuth, that type of thing. That happens in the interactive phase when you're actually seeing the web data connector window. Once you hit submit and you tell Tableau, yes, we're good to go, run, get the data, we then move into the gathering phase, or phase 2. This phase has no visual UI. It's all happening in the background. When you see the little loading dialog, that's what's happening. It's at phase 2. And that's what we're going to move into now. So we're finished with phase 1. I'm going to add our submit function so we can actually move into phase 2. All right. So let me get that function in here. I had already set up the function to be run on the button click out here, so submit. And we're just going to build out that function here now. So our submit function doesn't need any arguments or parameters to get passed to it, but it does need to pass the information that we've gathered from the user into phase 2. Because remember, phase 2 has no GUI, it has no recollection of what happened. And when you do refresh, as someone asked earlier, when you do refresh, the interactive phase will not happen. It'll only run the phase 2 gathering phase. So any information that you gathered in the interactive phase, you need to save to connection data. So when it gets refreshed, Tableau could say, oh right, we're looking for Seattle, and then it can run what it needs to run. So we're gonna pull those things in here. First, let's go ahead and just grab the units, because remember, those 3 countries that still use imperial units, I want to be able to pass that in as part of my weather request later on. So I'm going to pull in the information from our checkbox here, and I called it, what did I call it? Units, of course, makes sense. Bring in units, and we're just going to pull in, is it checked or is it not checked? Okay, so I can look at the property, checked, and this will return true or false. That's all I need. Cool, so now that I have is that checked, I can build my connection data. Now the thing about connection data, make sure I spell this right, there we go, is that it only will accept a string value. So normally you might use like a JavaScript object, you know, if you've got a bunch of different pieces to keep together, what you'll need to do is stringify that JSON object, pass it in as a string, and then later on we can parse it out to pull out the different pieces. So here we're going to say Tableau connection data, and I haven't pulled in the Tableau library yet, but I'm just setting up the function and you'll see how it works in a second. So the connection data is going to be a stringified version of the objects you want to pull in. And that will be the latitude, which is our global variable, the longitude, and the units. I can then use these in the second phase to pull on the here weather API. Now we also want to add a connection name. And in this case, I'm going to use the actual city title as part of the connection name so you can remember what city is this. So I'll use title, and I'll just keep it simple, forecast. And lastly, we need to actually submit, tell Tableau, yes, we are done with the interactive phase. We have all the information we need. Go ahead and start phase 2. So we'll say Tableau submit. All right. Now, no, you don't really need the semicolons, but just for cleanliness, there we go. So that's what our submit function will do. Once we hit the submit button, we'll kick off the Tableau phase 2 and actually start to pull the data in. Now you'll notice I'm going to get an error here that Tableau is not defined. This is because we haven't pulled in the Tableau library, but also specifically in Glitch. One thing to note is that Glitch will, it doesn't notice the libraries you've pulled in from other files. So one thing to do, once I go ahead and add in my actual library here, and if you're wondering how I'm getting these things pasted in so nicely, I'm using, what's the tool called? Goodness gracious. Short Keys Lite, that's what I'm using. So if you ever have to do presentations where you are using a bunch of strings that you don't want to try and copy paste, highly recommend. Gigi told me about it. I've been using it ever since. It's awesome. So I now have my Tableau library pulled in so that I can actually build the web data connector. You'll see that Glitch is still like, wait, do you have Tableau though? So I'm going to just let it know that Tableau is available. It's a global entity that exists. Don't worry about it. It's there. So we now no longer get those errors. All right. So at this point, remember, we are finished with our phase 1. I have called tableau.submit. When you hit that button, we are now going to start working on the phase 2. So this is actually building the tables and getting the weather data. Before I hop in, quick check on the chat. Let's see here. two questions here. Is there any web data connector to get the latitude and longitude based on address? Well, the here API, it doesn't just take city. I'm using city just for the weather, but this will geocode any address or location that you pop into it. Just depends on the API that you're using. So in this case, if you want to get even closer to home, yeah, you could absolutely put in an address here to get really zoomed in specific weather forecast. Absolutely. And we can use ES6, right? Yes and no. Yes, in the latest versions of Tableau, I believe it's 2019.4 and later, you'll be able to use ES6. There are still a couple different functions and methods that you can't use. For instance, I was going to use a more interactive map for the map preview, but we don't support WebGL, so I'm using just an image for the map, right, that tile image. But most common things like arrow functions and that type of thing, yes, you can use as long as you're using 2019.4, I think, or later. All right, moving on to second phase. So the second phase of the Web Data Connector, we are using the actual Tableau pieces, and we're going to be building our connector out. So all the other things are done. We're going to start a new Tableau connector. I'm just going to call it My Connector. And we're going to tell Tableau to make a connector. All right, so we now have initialized a new Tableau connector, and you need to do 3 things to complete this, at least at a minimum. There are a couple other things you can do if you're doing more of a custom web data connector, but these are the basic things you need. First, you need to define a get schema function. This is the function that Tableau is going to call to create the tables with their columns. So we're saying my connector. The function you need to define is called get schema. And get schema will pass to you a schema callback. And we're going to use that function once we've finished creating the schema to send it back to Tableau. Cool. We'll come back to that and fill it out in a second. The other thing you're going to need is a get data function. So once Tableau has built the tables, that's that scene that you open to once you hit submit. You have the table on the left-hand side, you've brought them out, but no data is showing up. That's the next get data phase. So you need to tell Tableau, what do we need to do to actually pull that data in? So my connector, not main connector. And the function is called get data. And this time, we're not just pulling in the schema callback, we're also going to pass the table that you're currently looking at in Tableau. So in this case, we're passing the table and a done callback to let Tableau, yep, we're done getting all the data. Okay. Finally, now that you've initialized the connector, you've told it, we're going to tell it more information later, but you're going to tell it the get schema and get data functions what to do. You need to register your connector at the end. So in this case, very simple, just Tableau, register connector, and you're going to just register my connector. So that's the basic structure of what's happening in phase 2. Now let's go ahead and fill out each of these pieces, specifically the get schema function and the get data function. So the get schema function, you need to tell Tableau what the tables are going to look like. How many tables are there? What are the columns, the column names, the column data types? You also have the option to do things like custom aggregations and formatting. I'm not going to do that for today, but those are the types of things you're going to build into your table schema. So the first thing we need to do is add the columns. So remember, I'm doing 2 tables. So if you folks want to look at this as a daily level or the hourly level, they have the option to do either one. So first, let's create our daily columns. And this is going to be an array of objects. and each object will need to have its own information about each column. So daily columns, so this object is one column. We'll give it the ID of date. Oops. And ID is a required field. I can also give it an alias. This is optional, but I tend to like giving my web data counters aliases so I know that they'll come in exactly how I want them to show up in Tableau, which is just date. And finally, the other required piece is the data type. And in this case, we're just going to use date. Now you can learn about what exactly you need to pass in for your columns and what the data types are, all within the API reference. So here you can just see, for example, we have the lists of different data types, right? You can also do different aggregation types if you wanted to as an option, but for today I'm just going to keep it simple. Now in the data connector I'm building, I want to include a bunch of stuff. I want to include the temperature, high and low temperature, the wind speed, the wind direction, UV index, is it snowing, is it raining? So I want to build out an object for each and every single one of those columns. Now just to save time, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me type out all of these columns. So I have that as another short key that I'm going to go ahead and just have that automatically populate here. Let's see if it will. Oh goodness. There we go. Took a second. All right. But as you see, I had that date function here, or object, the exact same thing, right? Each of these objects within our array is a different column in the table. So I'm pulling in the description. It'll say things like mildly warm, or sunny with a light breeze. That type of thing will come in. For the daily, we have a low temperature and a high temperature for the day, as well as some rainfall, humidity, wind speed and direction, and then the UV index and a description. So all you need to do is just put each of those in with the data type and an ID. So now that I have my list of columns, I need to bring those in as a table, or a table schema. So in this case, I'm going to call this, let's just call it daily schema. And this is just an object, and it also needs an ID. So let's call this daily forecast. Again, I like having an alias. Okay. And you need to tell it what columns this table is going to have. And in this case, we're using our daily calls that we had defined right here. So we're just passing in all these items, just going to minimize that a bit, there we go, into this daily schema. Do the same thing again for the hourly columns. They're a little bit different. So for instance, if you think about the whole day, there's not only one temperature for the whole day. So the daily temperatures will give you a high and a low, whereas the hourly will get you the exact temperatures for each hour here. Maybe. Oh, it's so slow today. Maybe because it's like a lot of text. Yeah, there we go. Goodness. All right, but it's the exact same thing here. So in this case, let me just minimize this again. We're just setting up the second set of columns for our second table. In this case, we've got the date, but now we're talking about hourly, so I also want to bring in date time. The description, like I mentioned, the hourly forecasts give you a temperature for each hour instead of the low and high. We still have the rainfall and the snowfall, the humidity and the wind speed, but we don't get the UV index because that's more of a daily forecast. It's only showing up in the daily. Now, how do I know I have all of these things that I can pull in? Well, we're looking at the Here Weather API reference. So if you take a look at the response here, let me open this page up. Based on our forecast, you'll see, if I can find it. Here we go. You'll see all the types of things that get pulled in from their API. So things like temperature, high, low, temperature, humidity. So for today, I just pulled out a couple things that I thought were interesting. If you guys are going to try this on your own, feel free to bring in more or different pieces from the API, but that's where I'm pulling these things from. And I'll show you the endpoint for it in just a second. But just in case you're wondering, like, how does she know where to find these things? That's what I know. So we've got our hourly columns, and again, same thing, we need to make our table schema for the hourly table. So I'm just going to copy this, call this our hourly schema. It's our hourly forecast. And not daily columns, but now hourly columns. Cool. All right, so now that we have defined all the columns, their data types, their IDs, and what tables they belong to, we can then send our tables back to the schema callback. So this is again a function that gets passed, and I can say, yep, we're done. Here are the tables. Go ahead and create those in Tableau. So we're going to say schema callback, and it takes an array of data. So in this case, we have two tables. So daily schema and hourly schema. And that is all we need for the get schema function. So let's go ahead and actually try this out in Tableau and see if I can show you what this looks like. So I'm going to just open up, let me just grab this link. Okay. Also, if you are curious about like standard connections, that right here is where you would pass in a standard connection as a second variable to the schema callback. Not doing it today, but just in case you're curious. So let's go ahead and close this, and I'll start a new connection. All right, so we've got our city here. Let's do a different city. Let's do, all right, somebody give me a city in the chat. Where should we go? I need a new, a new sample city to use instead of just using Seattle all the time. Palo Alto, that's the first one. There we go. Cool. All right, Palo Alto. You can use my imperial units. Get our forecast here. All right, so you'll see we have success. Woohoo! Just in case you're running though, just in case it didn't work, we do have my Chrome 79 here open. Now, I'm not going to talk about how to set the debugger because we have the full instructions in the documentation. But again, just download the debugger, and when you run Tableau, you can run it with a debug flag, which will turn on a debugger server for you, which I have running already. And here I can see all the different things that are running in desktop. Here is my web data connector, and this is where you can look at anything that's going wrong. But lucky for us today, no mistakes so far. We've got our daily forecast and our hourly forecast tables. If I bring these in, you'll see we get the columns that I specified with their nice aliases and their names. We've got the right data types, right? So strings for the descriptions, date for the dates, numbers for everything else. Looking great. If I were to hit update now, though, nothing would happen. Why? Because I have nothing in my get data function. That's what we'll build out next. But you can see here we are getting the tables coming in properly, and the schemas for those tables with the columns are coming in properly. All right, we're gonna take a quick look in the chat. Let's see. Ooh, how do we configure cores for our web data connector? Ooh, interesting question. So for cores, you need to basically either your service needs to allow that, whatever service you're pulling data from needs to allow it, or you would need to use their server side of your web data connector. You wouldn't be able to do that with this plain like client-side JavaScript, because right now I just have an index.html page, some JavaScript, CSS. There's no server backend. You would want to use a server backend to send those requests and use it as a proxy for your web data connector. That's what you would do there. But maybe we can do it in a live stream. We'll try one with cores. I don't know. We'll see. Send us an email if you really want it. developerprogram@tableau.com. If you want to see, select that. Let us know. Maybe we can do a sample for you as well. Somebody asked to see the debugger again. Absolutely. Let me show you what that looks like here. Don't mind my beautiful background. This is Hawaii from my last trip. One day we'll get to travel again. One day. But what you can do is actually in your properties here, I don't have it set up on this one, but just to show you what this looks like, you would add the remote debugging tag, right, to the end of the target here. This is an easy way to do it for Windows. We also have instructions on how to do this for Mac on the documentation too, but this is the flag you want to do. Then you would close all of your instances of Tableau, reopen it using this shortcut, and it will have the debugger running in the background so that if you go to localhost 8696, or whatever port you want to enter there, that doesn't matter, you can put whatever port you want, you will then see whatever's running. You can use the same thing for debugging your extensions as well. Alrighty. Now we've got our schema set up. We know the tables are looking good. We're going to go ahead and do the last step here, and that's actually getting the weather forecast. We need to get this data. So one thing to note here, remember, we want to get the data from the interactive phase, and we had stored that information in the connection data. So we want to first pull out the information from the connection data so we have it to send to here for the weather API. So let's start by, I'm going to just pull out, let's call this let's call it connection data, sure. And we're going to parse out the string, because remember, connection data must be a string. Even though I sent it a stringified JSON, we need to make sure we parse it back out so I can pull out the pieces for latitude, longitude, and units. So we're going to parse out Tableau connection data, and this now will be an object. So just to show you the difference, if I console log Tableau connection data, let's see, can I do this? Let's see here. Let's see if this will work. If not, you'll just have to take my word for it. But let's see, can we get this to log out for us? Oops, let's do a new one. There we go, cool. So you'll see that this is what we're getting. It's just a string. It's not actually an object, right? Remember when I was showing you the objects before? Well, way back, goodness. Oh, we might have lost it. But you were able to actually expand the object, right? We could navigate and look through and see all the different pieces. You cannot do this with this because it's just a string. So make sure you're parsing that data back out. Now that we have that, I can pull out each of the different pieces that I had passed to it, which is the latitude, the longitude, and the units. Now in this case, it may not make sense to make all these variables, but pretty good practice because sometimes what you're passing to the connection data is a little bit more complicated, but it's all right, that's fine. We also want to set up an empty array. I'm going to call this table data, and this is where we're going to store all of the rows as we go through the data we get back from the weather API, and once we're done, I'll pass table data back to Tableau to populate the information. Now, one thing to note about our get data function. The way this works is that for every single table you have in Tableau, you can go ahead and cancel this, it's never going to end. Every single table you have here in Tableau, it's going to run the exact same get data function. So even though I want to pull in different things for daily and different things for hourly, it's going to use this exact get data function for every single table. So you want to let it know, well, when you're pulling daily stuff, I want you to use this API and pull this information. And when you're using hourly, I want to use this API, use this information. We can use the table ID, right, that we set up here, and say if the table ID equals daily, then do this. If it equals hourly, then do that. Okay, so we're going to set that up. So I can say if the table, and again, table is being passed in to the get data function. So this will happen for the daily forecast and the hourly forecast. So I can check for the table that we're on right now. Look at the table info. Check the ID. Does the ID equal the ID we have up here, daily forecast? If it does equal daily forecast, then I want you to run whatever. So let's set that up. Again, we're going to use our weather data API here. Let's go back a bit. It was here. Here we go. Pretty straightforward. Again, we have the endpoint that we're looking to pull the data from. We're pulling in the API key. We're putting in the product we want, and we're going to pass it a name, or in our case, we're going to pass the latitude and longitude. Now, I do know that you can pass in the name in general, but remember, I wanted to make sure that we were getting the exact location that the user wanted. That's why I'm opting to use latitude and longitude specifically, because you know exactly where on the map it shows up, and you're like, yes, that's where I want to go. So we're going to use latitude and longitude, but that is what the request looks like. Now we also have an option in here, if I can find it, for metric. And this basically defines, do you want to use the metric system for the units? The default, of course, is true, and we'll be passing in our units flag. So if someone had checked that box, we can switch it to imperial units. All right, so I'm going to copy this here, this request, and set up our URL. Just going to give myself some space here. There we go. So URL here, again, using that nice JavaScript templating. All right, so we've got the endpoint, and we also want to add in our API key. Here we go, API key. Why am I getting... Oh, equals. Whoops, there we go. I was like, that doesn't look right. Thank goodness, Glitch tells me things that are wrong, except for when you forget to uncomment your functions. Can't tell you that. But here we go, we've got our URL. We've got the API key we're passing in. Now the product, this is where we need to look at the API again. So here we have a bunch of different products that we can use for the weather. I'm going to be using the 7-day simple product for the daily weather, and then of course the hourly for the hourly weather. So we're going to grab the name here for the 7-day simple forecast and use that as my product. Now I'm not going to be using name, because like I said, I'm going to be using latitude and longitude. So here we're going to pass latitude equals, and what do you know? We're going to grab the latitude from our connection data. So we have lat, and then we're going to add in longitude. All right, so we've got our latitude and our longitude here from within this function. Next, we want to make sure we throw in the metrics for, or the metric option, I should say, for those of us in, non-metric countries. So we want to add in metric. And in this case, it's a little bit opposite, because the checkbox, if it's true, it means you don't want to use the metric system, right? So we actually want the opposite of whatever was checked. So if it was checked, if it's set to true, then we want metric to be false. So to do that, I can just use the exclamation point to do the opposite of units. All right, so let's just break that down one more time. We have the weather report endpoint. We're passing in our API key, passing in which product we want to use. In this case, we're doing this simple 7-day forecast. Passing in our latitude and the longitude, as well as the option to use the metric system or not. Cool. Now we have our URL set up. We can go ahead and fetch our weather forecast. So fetch this URL. Again, once we have that, we're going to get a response. And we want to grab the JSON body from the response. Once we've done that, we then have the data to look at, and we can start to build the table data. So just to give you an idea of what this data looks like, let's go back here, see if I can show you a response. We're looking at the daily forecast. Click through a bit here. Actually, no, I think it's on this page. Yeah, this is the page I want. Oh, no, it's not. Let's get one. Oh, where did this page go? I wanted to show you the full, there's like a nice layout of what the data looks like. Oh, here it is. Yes. Okay, so once you pull in the daily forecast, you'll get the information sent back to you looking like this. So it starts off with daily forecast, then the forecast location, and then an array called forecast that has a bunch of objects for each day, or if you're using the hourly one, it's for each hour. Okay, so I'm going to go through and grab this data. But again, let's just take a look and see what we're getting here, make sure we're all set up appropriately. I'm going to go ahead and console log our data. I'll come back and refresh. Sometimes it doesn't work, but most of the time this does work, so we'll see. Let's take a look at the page here. And update now to actually get the data. What are we going to do? Oh, I'm on the hourly one. Wrong one. I'm working on daily right now. Cancel. There we go. Make sure I pull in the right table. Let's see, will we get it? Oh, there's an error here. Well, good to know. Let's see what's going on. What is going on here? My JSON, I've got some type of issue. JSON, we're parsing out the information from our connection data. We've got our connection data here, we're looking good. Let's just parse out, let's console log one of these items. Make sure we're not, actually just do all of the items. Make sure we didn't mess anything up there, and then we'll come back. Let's refresh. Okay, so we are getting those. That looks good. We've got daily forecast equals that. Let's make sure we pass out, let's do the URL here. Make sure I didn't mess anything up in the formatting. Cool. All right. Let's see. Got our API key, latitude, longitude, metric looks good. We're using our API, yep, that's all in there. We've got that. Let's see, what am I missing? Console, okay, response looks good. This is what you get with live debugging, folks. Here we go. So we know that that's good. We're pulling that in. That looks fine. URL looks good to me. Maybe I'm just going to console log out the response here. And again, if you guys see it in the chat, let me know. changing our URL. We're on daily forecast. So we are getting a response. Looks good. Well, let's try parsing out one of the pieces here then. Let's see what's going on. So we want to grab the response data, response. And then the data, yep. And then let's try grabbing the forecast. So from data, remember this hierarchy, daily forecasts to forecast location to forecasts. It's a little bit long. So we want data, daily forecast, dot forecast, location, dot forecast. That was it, right? Daily forecasts, forecast location, forecast. This is an array of the days for forecasts. Let's see. And if it doesn't work, I'll still keep going and we can always come back to it later, but just for the sake of time, I don't want to go over an hour and a half. That's my goal, is to try and stick within an hour and a half. So let's see here. What's going on? Really just does not like something. No, the 4, I see in the chat someone said maybe it's the 404. Nope, that's just for the favicon not coming through. This is unusual. I don't want to have to cheat, but I might have to. Just if I have to, go back and grab some code because I'm missing something. We're definitely running it. We're definitely fetching the data. For cats, well that definitely won't be good. Good catch, Phil. But it should still be able to console log my data out. Ooh, get out of here. All right, I will try this one more time, and if not, I'll have to cheat. I really didn't want to cheat, but for the sake of time and everyone's learning, I might have to. Yeah, something's just not quite right. Okay. Well, I'm sorry guys. I didn't want to cheat, but I'm going to cheat. Let me swap over to my fully completed project, which by the way, you guys can grab at any time to check out. Man, I just can't figure out what, and it's such a weird location. It's not even telling me a specific point. Daily forecast, response. Actually, I wonder if it's something to do with my API here, or the URL. I'm gonna start there. Let's see here. Let me grab just the URL. Maybe I messed something up there where it's fetching stuff, but it's not really. So let's start there. No, that looks fine. Make sure I put this as. And I'm also going to copy the fetch here as well. Oh, I'm such a cheater, I'm sorry. But let's see if that at least is what was causing it. I'm gonna comment out all of this stuff for now, because I still want to go through that with you guys. But let's try that. Also, you know what? Let me also restart Tableau, because sometimes things get cached and it doesn't always update. So just in case. All right, ADev Live. And I saw someone shouted out Cleveland a while ago, so we'll get Cleveland in here. Get our empirical units, get the forecast, and let's see. So daily forecast, take that. Whoop. Make sure I'm running this with the debugger, even though I just told you guys to do that and I didn't do it. We're still going to do Cleveland, don't worry. Is our debugger up? Okay, good. Debugger's up. Good. There we go. I don't know what part I was wrong on. Sorry about that. But we're good to go. Moving on. All right. 10 more minutes. I think we can finish this up. So let's get rid of all of this so we can code it together live. Alrighty. And to get the code, you can either go to, actually, let me just send you this copy right here. If you want to see the finalized code, there is the URL you can grab. Just paste it in the chat. For those of you that are watching this on YouTube, I'll have the link below the video, but also here is where you can grab it to look at the code too. Okay, phew, well, not sure exactly what happened there. Maybe I typoed something, but let's move along and then we'll finish this up. So we're getting our data here, right? We have our daily forecasts. Forecast location, we're specifically looking at downtown Cleveland, Ohio. We have 7 days, so we're getting 7 objects within our forecast array. And then within each of these day objects, we have all of the different pieces of forecast information, the temperature, the UV index, etc., etc. So I'm going to go through for every single day, so 7 days. We're going to loop through each day, pull the information we need, and add it to table data. Once we're done, we can then send that data back to Tableau and it'll populate the information for us. So, continuing on, let's go ahead and loop through each of the forecasts. So I can say let day of forecasts. And remember, that's each of those objects with the different temperature and etc. information. We're going to push in a row of data into our table data array. So we'll say table data, push, and we're going to push in an object. So here we need to match the exact same columns that we pass in the table schema. You need to match them up with the IDs and make sure we don't leave anything out or name them the wrong things. Now I have my notes here so I don't have to keep going back up and forth of what the different things are. So I'm just going to go through and run through these. Now for the date, I'm going to be pulling in, if I take a look here and I show you, we have the UTC time. I'm just going to pull in the first 10 characters here to use that as my date. I don't really care about the time zone difference because this will be for, you know, whatever day you're looking at. So I'm going to say based off of the day. Remember, that's our specific instance of each of the forecasts that we're looping through. We're going to pull in that UTC time, and I'm going to use the substring function to grab the first through the 10th characters in that time. So that'll be our date. Next, we want to bring in the description, and actually I think I did this as a short string. I think I did. Because again, who wants to sit here and type through all these things? No one. So here we go. We've got the rest of these. So the description, pulling from day.description, right? So if you take a look here, there you go. Partly sunny and warm apparently in Cleveland today. We're pulling in that description. We've got our low and high temperature. So here we go, low and high temperature. And we've got all the other different points that match up exactly with what I have in the daily columns schema. And remember, you want to match your data types to what's being pulled in as well. Tableau will understand if you have a string that's a number. So for example, if I'm looking at the temperature high, even though it's a string here, Tableau will understand, okay, you're looking to put this in as a float or an integer, it will do that for you. So I have those as the right data types. I've pulled those in for each one, and I can then push each row, we have 7 rows, push each row into our table data. Once we're done pushing in all those rows, we want to append the table data back to the table we created earlier. And that's the object that was getting passed in. So we're going to say table, this is the already created table in Tableau, table, append rows, and we're going to pass it in this table data we kept pushing those rows into. Once we're done and spelled it correctly, we can then run the done callback to let Tableau know all of the rows of data that we need for this table have been added. You're good to go. The get data function for this table is done. Now we're going to do the same exact thing, but for the hourly data. So I'm going to just copy this script block here, and we're going to run the exact same thing. So in this case, we want the hourly forecast. And again, that's the name or the ID of our hourly table. Instead of using the 7-day simple forecast, let's go back to our guide here. You'll see we have another option for the hourly. I look in the API reference. Here we go. Right, so the hourly is forecast underscore hourly, and that will return to us, instead of 7 objects for 7 days, it will return to us an object for every single hour of every single day for the next 7 days. So we'll swap out the product we're using for the API from 7 days to forecast hourly. We still are passing in the latitude, the longitude, the metric option, and the API key. Everything else stays the same. In this case though, we're now looking at not a day, but an hour. Now we still have the date, so we'll keep that, but I also have date time. Now the reason I'm keeping date and date time, you don't necessarily need to have both, but I do know that if someone wants to combine their daily and their hourly data in a join in Tableau, you're going to need something to join it on. So that's why I kept date for the hourly, but I still want to show the actual hourly hours. Hourly hours. So we're going to keep the date, but for the date time, we're going to start off similar. So hour.utc time, and we're pulling out those first 10 characters with the substring function. Okay, we're going to start with that, but I'm going to make this a full string for our date and time. So we're going to wrap these in our little format quotes here, and we're going to start with the date. Then I'm going to do a space. Then I'm going to bring in the hour. Now, if I look at the data, let's pull in the hourly data here. Let me do this for you. Let's pull this in so I can show you what this looks like. Let's pull in the hourly data. Cancel. There we go. Pull this in. Update now. Oh, make sure I refresh. There we go. Just so you can see what this looks like. There we go. So we're getting the hourly forecast now. you'll see that we have, within the forecast, they give us the UTC time, but they also give us a local time. So this local timestamp includes the hour, the day, the month, and the year. I'm going to use the UTC time to grab the date, and then I'm just going to grab this first 2 digits here that represent the hour. Now the reason I'm pulling in the local time is because I want to represent the time of the actual city you're pulling in, right? It shouldn't just be Seattle time all the time. If you're pulling in Mauritius information, you want it in that particular time zone. So that's why I'm going to pull in the local time so that you'll know whatever time zone you're looking at, that's what you're going to get. All right, so back to where we were. Let's continue. We've set up, we're pulling in specifically for the hourly forecast data. We want to make sure we're pulling in now hourly forecast. As we can see, we're getting that hourly forecast now. And for each hour, we're going to pull in, so we've got a date time, I've got the date here, and then for the second piece, we want to pull in the substring from the local time. So we're going to use our.local, was it local time? Local time, yep. And we're pulling it from the first to the second. And then I'm just going to add in :00. So the date time structure will be the year dash month dash day with a space, and then the hour :00. And the hours will go through the full 24-hour system, so Tableau will know that as well. All right, just going to pass over these here. So now we're looking at the hourly information. We still get a description, but remember we now have an actual temperature. We no longer need to use the low and high temperature, so we're going to just pull in that. Right? We still have rainfall, we still have snowfall, still have humidity and wind speed and direction, but they don't include the UV index in the hourly data. Again, if you just take a look here, you'll see we don't see any of the UV index, but we still see snowfall and humidity and rainfall. All right, so this is finished and we are done with our web data connector. So let's go ahead and try it out from scratch, make sure we're good to go, make sure everything's pulling in correctly. I'm gonna just close this and start fresh. And here we can see our live glitch page. Let's bring it back home to Seattle. Okay, we're getting the map, get the imperial units, get our forecast, and we'll see what happens. Again, might have a bug or two, but we'll cross our fingers. All right, give me all of the good feels that this goes through flawlessly and I didn't make any typos at all. Get out of here. There we go. Let's see. Oh, goodness. It's taking its time. Oh, that's never a good sign. Although sometimes I think it just takes a second. And then sometimes I swear I have to just redo the whole thing. So I'm going to give it a second and see if it's going to go through. Also, if you guys are testing it out too, then it might be going a little slower. Actually, while I'm doing that, let me go ahead and cancel this. And I'll take a look at the chat as well. See if there's any questions. Well, I try that again. All right, let me scroll through. And I got my 2 awesome photos. Oh, there we go. See, I swear, sometimes it just works, and then sometimes it's like, maybe I don't want to work today. But we'll come back to that in a second. Let me just take a look at the chat. Alex, you're right. I should have tried and just catch the error from the fetch back then when I was having that issue. You're so right. I should have done that. Let's see. We got the code. Okay, so question about, and again, My team has already awesome been answered, I think, all of the questions already, but just for the recording, if you guys have the same questions, someone's asking about when the data gets sent to Tableau, is it a live connection, and what is the data format when it's delivered to Tableau? So no, web data connectors are not live, they are extracts. So what happens is you pass in the data like I've shown you with that JSON object, with each of the different pieces of items that you want to pass in, and Tableau will make an extract of that data. You can hit refresh at any time, or if you've got Tableau Server or Tableau Online, you can have that refresh on a schedule. Ooh, it's got some questions about hyper in here as well. Yes, technically this does spit out an extract in the hyper file, correct? And if you want to learn more about hyper, make sure you keep an eye out for our notification when we're doing the hyper stream with Tucker. If you're not a part of our developer program, sign up now so you know when it's happening. Just go to developer.tableau.com and you can sign up. Is there an automated way to build a web data connector? Not that I know of. I'm not sure. I think you're going to have to get your hands dirty and build one yourself. I do have an example for JSON and XML data. I'll show it at the end if you want to think about using it, but I don't know of any builders, unfortunately. And one last question is about paginating. Great question. So if you have some paginated data that you're getting from your API, then you'd want to handle that in your get data function. What I like to do sometimes is I have a separate function where I go through based on how the pagination works for that API. Some APIs, they'll send you some metadata about the actual request. They'll say, next page, and they'll give you like a URL, or they'll say, is there more information? Like, yes, there's more. You do that pagination first, and then you append all that data into the table and then call the done callback. But that would all happen in your get data function. Remember, Tableau is just ready to receive the information. Whatever you need to do to make that happen, whether it's pagination or authentication, you can do within the application. And once you're done, you pass it on to Tableau. Cool. Oh yeah, and Gigi just posted the XML and JSON web data connector in the chat. I'll add it to the YouTube link below as well for the recording. So now that we're done, let's go back and test it. We've got our daily forecast. We've got the data. Do we have the data? Yes, awesome. So now you see we've completed the actual get data function. We've sent the data back to the table, and we call the done callback. We're no longer waiting around or getting the space circle, and we have all of our information. Let's test the hourly forecast. Let's see. Yes, awesome. Oh, almost. We're so close. One little piece missing. Looks like our date and time didn't come quite through. I'll go back and fix that, but everything else looks pretty darn good. We're getting our descriptions for the weather at the hour and our temperature in Fahrenheit, as well as the other options here as well. Cool. So let me just make sure I can go back and fix this. What did I mess up here? I'm going to cheat just for time's sake. And then we're at the end, and you guys have been so good to stay with me this whole long time. So I'm just going to just copy this from here, because I might have just made a mistake in my typo. And we are using hours in this case, so I'll make sure to swap those to hours. Ah, is that what it was? I think D Peak saw it. Did I have them backwards? Oh, I had 0 to 1. Yep, that would do it. Good call, D Peak. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly it. Let's try and refresh and see if that fixes it now that I have 10 instead of just 1. There we go. Now we're getting our date and time. And again, I kept the date here as well, just in case you wanted to bring these together. So if you want to, you can bring in their daily forecast, which has that higher level forecast information. And you can bring it in with our nice fancy new noodle. And yes, it is called a noodle. and you could tie those together on the date. So date and time wouldn't work, but the date to date will work. Cool. And that's it, folks. There you have it. That's how you build a web data connector from scratch, from start to finish, in just about an hour and a half, which was my goal. I wanted to get everything done within the hour and a half. I'll still be on for another minute or two to show you the generic web data connector I mentioned and answer any questions. But that's about it. Again, you can find the finalized code here at this link. I'll put it in the chat one more time. All right. And just in case you are curious about, I think somebody had asked about like a web data connector builder. Again, I don't know of a web data connector builder, but if you have really generic data, if you want to just pull in just like a really plain JavaScript or not JavaScript, a plain JSON file, something like that, then you can use this. Here we go. You can use this URL for a web data connector if you want to just connect a really simple data. So in this case, you need an API key to actually get the data, and I have some security settings set around that. But let's say you're just trying to pull in like some US Census data or some kind of cool public data, and you don't want to build your own web data connector, even though I just showed you how easy it is, right? But still, if you want to just do something really quickly, you can use this generic web data connector I made and just pop in the URL, hit next, and you can pull in that data for you automatically. It's not going to work for anything super complicated, but for some of the basic use cases, it definitely will work. Cool. Let me see. I think we're wrapped up, but let me take a look at any last questions. Oh, how do you schedule refreshes? Great question. So once you publish a data source, let's say connected to my data, you would hit server publish data source. You then log into Tableau server, and you would want to, oh, my webcam was gone. You guys can't see me anymore. Okay, that's fine. But you'd want to go into Tableau server, find the data source that you just published, and then you would add a refresh schedule to it. So that's what you would do to get that working. Here we go. Let's see if I can get my face showing again. Alrighty, hi guys, I'm still here. But yes, so that's how you would do it. So you make sure you publish the data source first to Tableau server, and then once you're in Tableau server, you can add a refresh schedule. If you're using Tableau online, you will need to use Tableau Bridge, but you can still set up the refresh schedule, and that can happen up to as frequently as every 15 minutes. And that's why we need that connection data. So you need to keep what city, the latitude, longitude, the units. That's why it's important to bring that data in. So when you're doing this remote refresh, it still has that information to look at. Okay. I think that's it for the questions. Thank you all for joining us. Again, if you have any requests for what you want to see next, if you want to see more about Hyper or web data connector or extensions or anything of that sort, shoot us an email at developerprogram@tableau.com. We'd be glad to take a look at your idea, maybe send you a sample, whatever you need, answer your questions. We're here to help you guys out. Thank you so much for joining. I'll stay on, I'll mute myself. I'm going to stay in the chat for one more minute if you have any last questions. And don't forget to sign up for the developer program. That's how you learn about some of these cool, awesome streams. Developer.tableau.com to get signed up. And you can get your own free sandbox site to develop with. So if you want to try this out with Tableau Online and try the refreshing with Bridge yourself, you can do that there as well. All right, thanks for joining everyone. My name is Keisha Rose, and I'll see you guys next time.